All right, guys. So today we are looking into the program design chapter. This is going to be kind of a fun one because, we are going over all of the individual phases. We did some level stuff, until now. Like there's been a few times where I've mentioned, some acute variables like sets and reps and stuff like that. But for the most part, until now, we've kind of spent our whole time just talking about exercise selection, like which exercises to put in which slots. We haven't really put a lot of emphasis on how many sets you're supposed to do, how many reps you're supposed to do, what percentage of your 1 rep max you want to lift at, all of that stuff. So we do want to get into that. And that's, what we're going to be looking at today. So our objectives, we want to be able to understand acute training variables, sets, reps, tempo, rest period, intensity, all of that stuff. We want to be able to be familiar with some of the physiologic considerations with our senior clients. Obviously, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. But again, our main priority today is really to kind of go over sets and reps and stuff. Describe which phase of training is most appropriate for your client. One of the things that's pretty common for us to talk about is how, with senior clients, stabilization is definitely going to be a staple for us. In terms of phases. Strength endurance is a really good one. We like hypertrophy as well, but max strength and power are both, things that don't really fit very well with what a senior client is kind of physiologically capable of, but it's also not exactly, it doesn't really match their goals either most times. So, we're going to be able to kind of describe like which phases are most appropriate depending on like what your client's goals are. And then obviously we can take all those numbers and throw them into a program that makes sense, right? So, so if we're looking at it, right, a lot of times when people consider like program design, like sort of the general approach is that a lot of people are just going to base program design, kind of based on their own past experiences. People are like, oh, well, this is what worked for me, and so this is what you should do. Hold on 1 second. So we kind of want, a lot of people would really kind of just base things on, they're like, well, this worked for me, it should work for you, right? That's kind of the old traditional programming method. And we know that that's not really a very accurate way to approach things because that's not taking into account, an individual's physiology. It's not taking into account the fact that like some people are going to biologically respond to things differently than others, So we want to kind of get away from that idea of just kind of doing, putting your clients through the same workout that you might do or something like that. Or working out with your clients, which don't do that ever. And get into the idea of like how to design, safe and effective programs that are, based on, our physiologic understanding of how the body is going to adapt to things, that are based on like what is important to your client, and really have been like time tested in the realm of stuff, right? Sorry, this is really distracting. I don't know what that is. Sorry. So my boss is texting me and it's not urgent, so she can wait. All right. To be proficient at program design, right? So if we're considering program design in general, if we're considering like, all of the pieces that have to come together to create like a safe and effective workout, we have to understand what exercises are most appropriate for our clients. So then we're going to go back to, understanding the neuromuscular specificity of things and understanding the mechanical specificity of things, right? We need to understand what exercises are contraindicated for our clients, what types of things we should avoid. If your client has arthritis, for instance, we talked about this last class. we know that high repetition actually puts a little bit too much pressure on those joints and can lead to inflammation and make those problems worse. If your client has diabetes, right, we need to be cautious of watching blood sugars. So we need to be exercising at appropriate intensities. We need to select the right number of exercises. We want to get the right amount of training volume over the course of a week. And we want to perform like the optimal amount of sets and reps. So there's a lot of stuff to consider. Like it gets a little, it almost seems a little overwhelming when you think about like how many numbers there are and sort of how to apply everything when you're trying to apply things as physiologically efficient as possible. It becomes really difficult, right? So we need to understand, like, in terms of like program design overview, we have to have a kind of a way to progress these numbers consistently, in order to like apply different types of physiologic stress so that our client doesn't plateau and that they still like achieve their results, right? So looking at this, in general, our considerations that we need to make, we need to understand, all of these like safe, effective like things. And that's where the OPT model really comes in, right? The OPT model, working our way from stabilization into strength into power. This actually does all of that work for you, right? Like old program design, old school trainers, it used to just be like, well, this worked for me, you should do this, right? But that's not, a very scientific approach. The OPT model is really great because it is a progressive model. Whatever phase you just got done doing is going to lead to you more effectively training in the next phase. It's your foundation. Everything is a foundation, kind of leading up it. So it's very systematic. That means that you can kind of work your way up the stairs, you can work your way down the stairs, and it allows us to make these what we call periodized training programs, which means that we can go through different phases of training where we're doing different types of stress and different types of things. That is going to improve all of the functions of, really any of our clients. An older client here, obviously, but any of our clients are going to seek improvements here. So this is where, like, again, kind of going back to the idea of periodization, annual plan. If you take a look here, let's say you had a client who, depending on like what their goals are, you could have like a different plan for them. We got phase 1, 2, 3. This is the OPT model. I guess it's kind of the staircase upside down here. But, in January, maybe you start them in stabilization to make sure that they know how to lift properly. Then you work them into strength endurance. Then their goal might be to like pack on some muscle. Then, they're going to want to, kind of shred up a little bit. And so they're going to want to go back to burning lots of calories. So you could very easily just drop back down here. You could go all the way back down here, right? This isn't a bad program right here. This is actually pretty good for changing body composition. Now, if you wanted to focus primarily on weight loss, well, then all you would have to do is really just kind of primarily focus on phases 1 and 2. You could just bounce back and forth like this, right? Or if you were training like maybe like a football player, right? So that's somebody who needs lots of max strength. They need to be pretty big on the field so they have plenty of body weight. So we're probably going to focus more on phases 1, 3, 4, and 5. And it'll probably look something kind of like this. Putting a lot of special emphasis on that max strength stuff. So again, very different programs for every one of our clients, right? Depending on what it is, we're really trying to get them to achieve. So we're going to talk today about all of these sets and reps and numbers and stuff. Now, just as a pre-warning, Bay, since you are the newest here, this is going to be your first time looking at a whole bunch of numbers today. And there's a lot to memorize here, but like I said, this is the kind of stuff that we go over a whole bunch of times throughout the program. And what I really recommend, we're gonna make what I like to call the big chart today. What I really, really, really recommend, I cannot recommend this enough, is that every time we do this chart, you make a new one and you write it down. And by actually physically like writing it down and like putting things in the right blocks and the right cells and stuff, it really, really, really helps with this whole process. As someone who's been doing this for a couple years now, I will tell you the difference that I see between students who struggle on their test and the ones who don't are the ones who like physically take their notes, and use flashcards and practice this stuff. I don't particularly love memorization, but it is a big part of like what we do sometimes. It really is a means to an end. So we got a lot of numbers to go over today, but first, just talking a little bit more about like the concepts, right? So our general considerations for our senior clients. In general, we're going to want to strength train anywhere from 2 to 3 days per week. We're going to want to do anywhere from 1 to 3 sets and 8 to 20 repetitions. So these are pretty, like, this is a pretty like medium to high volume style, because you can lift relatively light. You could do this multiple exercises per body part. You could do multiple stages per week, right? But with our senior clients, we're only training 2 to 3 days per week, so that's it's probably more of a medium training volume, maybe even low volume if necessary, depending on if it's a new client. But we can see, right, 1 to 3 sets, 8 to 20. We're not taking this down to like 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 reps, right? We're not taking this into like the super high intensity stuff. So we are definitely putting a special emphasis on phases 1 and 2 with our senior clients, which makes sense when you consider that like phase 1 is all about, developing like your stabilization endurance, right? And phase 2 is all about your strength endurance. So it's like both of these are very high repetition endurance styles of lifting, which is very important for senior clients, because that's what's going to ensure that like our senior client is able to, kind of stay upright, for their entire life, right? I want to keep them on their feet. So we definitely want to focus primarily on phases 1 and 2. And we want to progress towards like, free sitting or at least freestanding exercises if possible, because those are the types of exercises that are going to challenge our client's balance and make it a lot easier for our client to, again, stay upright for the rest of their life. They're training, to live a long, healthy life. That's really what our goal here is, right? Now, special considerations, always ensure that your client is breathing properly. You want to avoid the Valsalva maneuver. I know we haven't talked too much about the Valsalva maneuver in this class because we avoid it with seniors, but this is that technique that's always very important, especially in maximum strength lifting, where you basically take a big deep breath in to your stomach. You try to breathe as low as you can, breathe into the belly, and then what you do is you hold that breath for just a second, and then you exhale very forcefully. And when you're exhaling very forcefully, that drives your stomach out. And so that creates intra-abdominal pressure. And that's what you're going to do as you are slowly, like, concentrically lifting. So if you were thinking about, like, let's say it's like a shoulder press, because you guys can see that, right? Let's say I would have like, the barbell in my hands. I would go, and then I would push out on my stomach, and I would breathe kind of like this through like pursed lips. That's going to create a lot of pressure, which is going to pooch out my stomach, creating lots and lots of pressure as I lift through that range of motion. I would take that big deep breath in, just like that, right? And that seems a little silly. It seems a little showy, but that is one of the best ways to ensure that you are adding lots and lots and lots of pressure to your abdominal area, which is going to protect your spine as you start doing exercise. So this is a really big, very, very helpful maneuver that you definitely want to focus on, right? If you guys are doing heavy lifting, I recommend watching videos and practicing the Valsalva maneuver. It will really help with your intra-abdominal pressure. It'll really help with if you have a low back rounding problem, things like that. So inhale during the eccentric portion of the lift and forcefully exhale through pursed lips, like during the concentric portion. You'll notice, like right now, put your hand on your stomach and then exhale through pursed lips. You'll notice your hand will, you're gonna pooch your stomach out. That's the Valsalva maneuver. That's great for creating pressure and keeping your spine safe. However, it has been shown to massively raise your blood pressure. So if we have a senior client who has atherosclerosis or arteriosclerosis, this is not going to be the technique for them. This is not going to be a very good choice. We definitely don't want to focus on like something that is going to raise her blood pressure, right? Like raise their blood pressure. So if that's the case, we want to be pretty gentle here. And we want to make sure they are breathing regularly. In general, if foam rolling or static stretches are intolerable, if that long duration stretch tends to be very painful on either the joints or the muscles, your client can then instead perform slow rhythmic stretches like active isolated stretches. So this is where we have sort of a rule break, right? Generally, if your client is in stabilization, you give them static stretches. But if your client's in stabilization and those static stretches are really intolerable and very painful, you can then take the pressure off by having them do active isolated stretches. And then in every phase of training, we normally foam roll. But again, if that's going to cause like bruising or anything like that on your client, we want to avoid it. And then arthritic clients, we are definitely going to limit our repetitions anywhere from 8 to 12. We don't want to go into that super high repetition range because that's going to put too much inflammation on those joints. So, so those are some of the rule breaks before we actually get into the rules. But let's just assume moving forward, we've got sort of your baseline average client. They don't really have any contraindications, and they want to work their way through the entire OPT model. They want to do, we're going to start them on stabilization, strength endurance, hypertrophy, max strength, and power. We're going to do it all, right? If that's the case, and we're looking at this, we got to remember that like we are going to break this down into 3 primary levels. That's going to determine our exercise selection. So which choices we make, whether it's like a plank or a crunch or a medicine ball pullover throw, right? That's going to be determined by the level. But the repetitions that we're going to choose, those are going to be determined by the phases. So whether or not I do, let's say, 6 to 12 repetitions or 8 to 12 repetitions or 12 to 20 repetitions, that's going to be determined by the phase of training that I'm in. And that's what we haven't really spent too much time on just yet, right? So looking at the stabilization phase, right? If we're looking at this first level of training, which only has one phase within it, right? Look at the OPT model here. If we're looking at this, the stabilization level in terms of exercise selection, you are only going to pick one, stabilization endurance as a phase, right? There's nothing else to choose within here. So pretty much there, you can kind of think of them as the same thing. But again, remember the level is what determines your choices of exercises, and the phase is what determines like how much metabolic stress you are using on that exercise. So if I did like a bench press, I'm choosing that in the strength level. But if I decided to do like, 16 to 24 reps, or if I decided to do like 6 to 12 reps, or if I decided to do 1 to 5 reps, that's determined by my phase, right? So the first one we're going to look at is the stabilization level, which is the first level of training. This level, these exercises are designed to focus on preparing the body for the later levels of the OPT, right? This is going to prepare us for the harder exercise that is to come later on, right? Like this is meant to be the much more, foundational style of lifting. If you know how to do a wobbly shoulder press because you're sitting on like a stability ball, you definitely know how to do a heavy shoulder press once you get to it, right? You will use all those little micro muscles, and that's how we're going to build our foundation. So this is going to improve the stabilization of your core. It's going to prepare your joint tissues for any of the more challenging demands that are coming on. It also does improve like your cardiorespiratory system. Stabilization is like 7 seconds per rep, and the reps are like 12 to 20. So you end up being very aerobic when you're lifting stabilization. It really does kind of feel like cardio sometimes, especially if you do it as like circuit training. So it's really good at improving your cardiorespiratory and neuromuscular condition, obviously neuromuscular because of all the unstable movements. And it's helping us primarily establish proper movement patterns in 2 ways. Again, number one, I'm wobbly as I'm like going up. Like, let's say I'm standing on one leg, I'm doing all this like wiggling and stuff. Right now, my shoulder is learning how to stabilize through all these different ranges of motion. That's great. That's going to help me establish like a proper pattern. If I move the wrong way and I'm moving really slow like that, my body's going to know it's going to feel bad, and I'm going to adjust my rep. But the other nice thing is in stabilization, one of the things that we're going to see when we get to the exercise selection side, or when we get to the acute variable side of things, we're going to lift at this 4-2-1 tempo, which means that, the first, the portion of the lift that's concentric is only going to be 1 second long. That's pretty standard, that's pretty similar to our other ones. But then we're going to have like a 2-second pause on every rep. That's giving my brain time to realize, what position it is going for, right? Like it's learning like, oh, okay, this is where we're headed, right? And then I'm going to do 4 seconds on the eccentric, which is again going to teach me the appropriate path to like travel through. So that 4-2-1 tempo is going to look something kind of like this, right? I'm going to go 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now on a shoulder press, obviously the first part of my lift is the concentric part, but we don't change the way we label this around. It's always, whenever you're lifting tempo, it always goes the first number refers to the eccentric portion of the lift. The second number refers to the concentric, the isometric. And the third number always refers to the concentric portion of the lift. So it doesn't matter what order, if you're starting an exercise, concentrically or eccentrically, it does not matter. What matters is, remembering that this always goes in the same order. Looking at stabilization training, like I said, these are going to be very unstable exercises, right? So we call with this is going to be things like the single leg cable row or the single leg overhead press, right? That's very much like the unstable versions of these sort of common movements, right? Whether it's a press or a pull or a push, right? Or a hinge or a squat, right? Any of those, it doesn't matter. We're going to do an unstable version of those 5 primary movements. And so this only consists of one phase of training. The only phase you're going to see here is the stabilization endurance phase, which is utilizing stabilization exercises, again, to enhance muscle and joint stability. Now, our acute variables for this, if we were to open up like an OPT template and we wanted to plug this in, we would choose, if we were down here in the resistance section, we would choose resistance stabilization exercises, right? So that would maybe be something like a stability ball chest press, or maybe it is, maybe it's a single leg shoulder press, or maybe it is a, single leg squat touchdown, or maybe it's like a single leg bent over row, something unstable like that. But now we got to look at these ranges right here. So this is going to be 1 to 3 sets of 12 to 20 repetitions, and we're going to do it at a 4-2-1 tempo. We're going to take 0 to 90 seconds of rest, right? So that's how we're going to fill this out. And then this is going to be at 50 to 70% of our 1 rep max. So if you follow these rules right here, and you just write a program based on this, you're going to do a pretty good job of establishing a really good foundational baseline for your client. And obviously, this is what your program would actually look like. You would probably not have, ranges like this. You would choose one, right? You'd be like 3 sets. We're going to go with, 15 because it's in the middle, right? We'll say 60 seconds of rest. And then 15 should correspond with about, 60% 1 RM. So your real routine would actually look something, kind of more like this. But this is kind of our our example version here, where it's like we have our entire range. I'll put that in italics, right? So our example, we choose an exercise from the stabilization level of training, and we do 1 to 3 sets, 12 to 20 reps, somewhere in between there, right? Here's the classic 3x15 that works really well for, you know, newbie clients, right? So that's great. That's our stabilization level, right? That's the only phase of training that we're looking at there. Now, in the strength level, things get slightly more complicated because now we're going to see we've actually got 3 individual phases within this level, right? So first, let's talk about what the strength level is. So the strength level is really designed to improve your force production. That's really what we're going for here, right? We're trying to, like, you know, it's like, hey, I can produce, you know, 135 pounds of force in my shoulders. I want to get that up to 150, right? Okay, great. You want to improve your force production. You're trying to improve your strength, right? That's what strength is. So we're really putting a special emphasis here on developing our prime mover strength. And that's great because, like, this is going to further enhance our work capacity. You know, we are still going to see joint stabilization here, and it can increase our lean body mass, which is always really good, right? This is the type of exercise that really puts a lot of stress on the myofilaments inside of your muscle cells. And so your body will then trigger like, oh, okay, I need to experience like myofilament growth. We call that myofibular hypertrophy. So we want to see, like, you know, the heavier we lift, the more your body goes, okay, I need more proteins inside this muscle cell. I don't have enough proteins to lift it, right? Definitely see an increase in lean body mass. We're seeing an increase in the motor unit recruitment. So we're seeing an increase in how our nervous system knows how to recruit our muscles, which is great. And it's going to improve our peak force capacity, which, again, you know, we're talking about strength, right? So within this level, like I said, there are 3 phases, right? Now, generally, we're going to keep our senior clients in the strength endurance phase. But again, today's lesson is all about going through the entire OPT model. So we are going to, we'll start with strength endurance here, right? So strength endurance is the second phase of the OPT model, right? Like, this is phase 2, which falls under level 2. Which means we choose strength exercises and we do them in a strength endurance sort of manner, right? Now, here's the thing. Strength endurance, when I say that it uses strength exercises, it does primarily. However, it should be noted that you are actually going to do a superset technique whenever you are in strength endurance. And phase 2 is almost like phase 1.5 because it's easing out of stabilization. It's not really jumping super hard into the strength level. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to steal some of the stuff from level 1 and use it in level 2. So you're going to do superset techniques here. So a superset, right, by definition, is just 2 exercises back to back with little to no rest, right? So if you did like walking lunges and then you set the dumbbells down and immediately you grab, you know, like a resistance band, you start doing chest presses, right? That's a superset. You take no rest in between, you're supersetting them together. You finish this chest press, you go back to your walking lunges, right? You can rest between sets, but you don't rest between exercises. So that's what a superset is. Now, in NASM's strength endurance level, you are going to do a superset technique, but there are 2 additional rules. Number 1, your superset technique for strength endurance is going to be for the same, you're going to do 2 exercises for the same body part. So for instance, I would do a bench press and I would pair that with a push-up, right? Because a bench press is a chest exercise and a push-up is also a chest exercise. So again, think about the idea of endurance here. I'm doing 2 exercises back to back. Who in here, out of the 3 of you guys, who has done drop sets? Charlie, Kenny, Babe, have you guys done these?
That would be me.
Yeah, you done drop sets before?
Yeah, I have.
Yep. All right. So a drop set, they're brutal, right? I mean, they're freaking tough. Because you're like, all right, that was heavy and exhausted. Oh God, there's another dumbbell. And then you keep going, right? Like, that's how we apply strength endurance. So we're gonna pick 2 exercises for the same body part, and it should feel very similar to drop sets, but there's one more rule. The other rule is that your first exercise must be a strength level choice, and your second exercise should be a stabilization level choice, right? So let's take a look at what that looks like in program design land, right? So in strength endurance, what this is going to look like is you're going to choose a resistance strength exercise. And then the way I'm going to write this, I'm just going to put this one line down, and this is going to be a resistance stabilization exercise. So you're going to pair them up. So this rest period here is going to be 0 seconds, no matter what. But then this one can be anywhere from 0 to 60 seconds of rest. And then our rep changes are going to, our rep ranges are going to change here as well, right? So we're going to do 2 to 4 sets for both of these. Obviously, it has to be for both, considering that like they're paired up, right? Your repetitions are going to be 8 to 12 each. Your tempo is going to be 2-0-2 for your strength movement, but it's 4-2-1 for your stabilization movement, right? And then we are going to do 70 to 80% 1 RM for your strength exercise. And then we're going to go back to that 50 to 70% 1 RM for your stabilization. So now you can see we're pairing everything together, right? We're pairing everything together. We do 0 to 60 seconds rest is the rule for the strength endurance phase, but that doesn't apply to this first exercise. We always do 0 seconds rest for this first exercise. Then we take our rest after the second one. So this is sort of how this looks. So now let's give a couple practical examples. Let's say the bench press, that's the classic chest strength exercise. But then we had that stability ball chest press. That was that stabilization chest exercise. Then, and we'd probably make a choice. Let's say 3 sets for both of these. Let's go with 10 reps each, which really means it's 20 repetitions, right? 2-0-2 for the first tempo, 4-2-1 for the second, 0 seconds rest here, 60 seconds rest here, right? And then let's just say we put in like a pull-up, right? That's your classic kind of strength style resistance upper back exercise. And then we will pair that with a, let's go with like a single leg cable pull down, right? So they're standing on one leg, they've got cables overhead, they're going to pull very similarly to that pull up, right? So again, 3-3, 10-10, 2-0-2, 4-2-1, 0 seconds rest, 60 seconds rest, right? So that's how we're going to pair these up. It's the superset technique, but it's always for the same body parts, and it is always strength first, stabilization second. Any questions on that? Bae, how you feeling?
Good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, so there we go, right? Using that superset technique, 2 to 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps, 2-0-2, 4-2-1, 70 to 80, 0 to 60 seconds rest. So that's going to be really good if our client is here, right? If they're in strength endurance, that's how we're going to write those programs. Our programs, they're basically going to look something just like this. Also, you can still do this as a circuit, by the way. Like you just delete that and then make this 0 seconds rest, you know? Nothing wrong with that either. You know, this is sort of the vanilla traditional version. Now, after that, we're going to move into hypertrophy. And hypertrophy is right in the middle of the OPT model. So it's not super high intensity the way the top of the OPT model is, but it's also not low intensity the way the bottom of the OPT model is. This is sort of your traditional you know, hypertrophy, bodybuilder, kind of middle of the road style of lifting. And so this is great for increasing strength, but really what it's really good at is increasing your muscular size, right? Because we kind of experience hypertrophy in two primary ways, right? We kind of experience muscle growth in sort of two ways. There's a couple of different things here, but you can see here is sort of a difference, right? Here's sort of a normal muscle fiber, right? And then you see here, we made the cell bigger, but the proteins within that cell are the same, you know, there's the same number of proteins. There's not any more proteins. This is what we call sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. We literally just kind of injected some fluid into the cell through training, obviously. But, you know, the cell kind of just decided to grow because it got really puffy. There's also myofibrillar hypertrophy, which is what we see here, where there's actually more proteins within the muscle cells. So this type of hypertrophy is what you experience when you're experiencing like a pump or like a really intense burn. Like when you're doing exercise and it's burning like crazy, you're like, ah, God, right? And then that causes your muscles to kind of puff up. That's going to result in sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, right? And then myofibrillar hypertrophy is, you know, this is where we need to lift at relatively heavy weights in order to experience like your body to go, okay, wow, I'm not strong enough to lift these weights that I'm trying to lift. Clearly, I need more muscle. And so then it actually develops more proteins in response, right? So hypertrophy training is right in the middle of those styles of lifting that can do both of those things, right? It's still relatively short rest. It's still relatively high repetition. So you're going to see sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, but it is also still relatively heavy, which means that it can, you know, result in myofibrillar hypertrophy. So we're seeing both those things kind of happen simultaneously. And so you're going to notice all of our sets and our reps and stuff, it's kind of just in the middle. It's the middle, you know, sort of the jack of all trades, master of none, right? So this is going to utilize moderate intensity with moderate duration exercise in order to create maximum cellular growth, which is our goal. That's what hypertrophy is, right? It's muscle growth. So this is really easy. These are the simplest. This is honestly the simplest programs to write. You're literally just going to choose resistance strength exercises. You are going to do anywhere from 3 to 6 sets of 6 to 12 repetitions. You're going to lift at a 2-0-2 tempo. You take 0 to 60 seconds rest, and your intensity is going to be 75 to 85%, 1 RM. So as long as you're applying this like this, you're going to experience hypertrophy pretty well, you know. 1 minute of rest, 3 to 6 sets, you know. 4x8 is a really popular one. You could do 4x10, you could do 3x12, you could do you know, 5x6 if you want. That's on the border of like strength and stuff. Or you could kind of blend that all together. You could do like a high volume day and a low volume day, you know. There's a lot of different ways that you can apply this, but you know, you're only going to choose strength style exercise. So these are very stable versions of our lifts, right? Rather than single leg this or single leg that, you know, we want to be like bench supported this, right? So a bench dumbbell chest press is a classic, right? Or a dumbbell bent over row is a really good one. Or maybe like, actually, you know what? Let's go with T-bar rows. You know, that's very supportive. Your chest's on this little pad, you know. Let's say it'd be like a seated dumbbell shoulder press, right? So you can lift relatively heavy, but you know, again, or you know, the classic like a barbell squat or leg extension or hamstring curl machine, you know, like all those are gonna be really good. These are all very stable exercises. So maybe we go with like 4 sets of everything, and we go with like, you know, 8 reps of everything. Our tempo 2-0-2. And we'll tell our client that they're going to take 60 seconds of rest. right? And there we go. That's a not bad total body routine, right? Bicep curl would be another really good example. Yeah, that's hypertrophy in a nutshell. That's the simplest one. Hypertrophy is honestly the easiest phase to kind of study. So then we get a client who's going to move into the maximum strength level phase, right? And so max strength, if they're moving up the OPT model, right, they've worked their way to endurance. Now, we've noticed that like our intensity is going, went from like 50 to 70 intensity to like 70 to 80. Then we went up to like 75 to 85%. So our intensity is climbing as we go up the OPT model. In max strength, we are going to hit maximum levels. That's why it's called max strength. So now our intensity is going to go all the way up to 85 to 100% maximum intensity. So maximum strength is going to utilize maximal intensities with low duration exercises, meaning that like if you're lifting really heavy, obviously you can't do a lot of reps. So low duration, 1 to 5 repetitions, in order to develop maximal force production. That's what we're going for here. Force production, right? So that's going to be anywhere from 4 to 6 sets. You'll notice that our sets are really high here. It has to be because our reps are really low, right? We're only doing anywhere from 1 to 5 repetitions. And we're going to list our tempo as XXX, meaning that you want to try to move as explosively as possible through the range of motion of the lift. You don't want to take any pauses because that pause is going to ruin your force production, right? So we try to lift very explosively, very quickly, even though you don't actually end up moving very quickly. What ends up happening is you're like, good God, that's heavy. You move really slow, but you're trying to move fast. You're trying your hardest. 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max, and then we're taking 3 to 5 minutes of rest. That is a lot of rest. And the reason we're taking a lot of rest is because that's going to make sure that we can lift at this maximal intensity every single time. We don't want to run into that scenario where it's like, I did 12 reps on my first round, but I was only able to do 6 on my second round. That shows me that you did not rest enough, right? So this is really what we're looking for here, right? 3 to 5 minutes of rest is really going to ensure that you're able to kind of reset things. Let's see here. So if we look at maximum strength, so max strength, we don't change anything. We're just, we're still choosing resistance strength exercises, but now you're going to see we are at 4 to 6 sets, 1 to 5 reps, fast tempo, maximum intensity. So 4 to 6, 1 to 5, XXX tempo, 3 to 5 minutes of rest. And then that intensity is going to be 85 to 100% of our 1 rep max. That is about as heavy as it gets. The classic program for this is bench press, military press, bent over row, barbell squat, and then honestly, like, you need to get the deadlift in there. This is kind of the classic. This is like the old school powerlifting routine. And you would do maybe like 5 sets, and maybe it'd be like around 5 reps. And the tempo, like I said, XXX. And 3 minutes rest. So that is your classic powerlifting routine right there. Now, honestly, this is going to take forever. These routines are very slow. So chances are you'll probably only do maybe 1 or 3 exercises, or about 3 exercises per lifting day, and then you'll split that training volume up onto like different days of the week. But if we were doing total body, it could look something kind of like this. This is exactly like you know, this is already an hour and 15 minutes just looking at the rest alone, not counting your warm up, not counting anything else. So, you know, this is challenging to get through in an hour. So that is sort of the classic, you know, max strength routine. So now we've sort of worked at, you know, very, very high intensities, but now we're going to really, you know, we've been increasing our force production, right? Like we learned how to produce force, then we learned how to produce, you know, high levels of force, even higher levels of force. Then we've got like maximum levels of force, right? So we've gotten stronger and stronger and stronger as we've worked our way up the OPT model. But now we're going to get to the power phase where we are going to work on rate of force production. Now we're going to try to improve how quickly we can produce that force. So this is where the intensity, you know, is going to be kind of played around with. It's going to have high and low intensity because if you're doing a blend, that means you can lift very explosively. So after successful completion of stabilization and strength, we can start developing speed and power, right? So this is very optional, but it can be beneficial really for everybody. And this phase of training is very similar to our strength endurance phase, right? So this phase here, this level is going to choose explosive versions of exercises, but the phase is going to determine that we are actually going to do superset techniques here very similarly to how we did in strength endurance. You might remember from strength endurance, we did, you know, a strength exercise paired with a stabilization exercise. Well, in the power level, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pair a strength exercise with a power exercise. And the reason for that is when you look at like the equation that is power, I want to have like a, I just want like a very simple version of this. All right. We're getting, you know, way too much mathy here. When you look at like what power is, it literally is power equals force times velocity. Okay, so that's really the big thing that we're going to see here. So we know that it's power, you know, if we have force, let's say like a force of, let's say 100 pounds, right? 100 pounds moving at 1 mile per hour is not as powerful as 100 pounds moving at 5 miles per hour, right? Because your total force output of the first one would be 100 times 1, and your total power output of the second one would be 100 times 5, right? Moving 5 miles per hour. So that also means that like 50 pounds moving at, you know, let's say 2 miles per hour, that's twice as fast as the first one, right? As 1 mile per hour. But 50 pounds moving 2 miles per hour, that's the same power output as 100 pounds 1 mile per hour. So if you're able to, but the nice thing is like if you're only lifting 50 pounds, well, chances are you could lift very explosively. So maybe you end up lifting at 10 miles per hour. So you're going twice as fast, right? But the force is definitely lower. So it would be 50 times 10. That's still a power output of 500. You see how we're doing? We took away from one, we added to the other, right? So it's power is force times velocity. So what we're doing is we're trying to hit both sides of that equation in the power phase of training. We are going to do a high force exercise in the style of maximum strength, and we're going to do a high power exercise in the style of, you know, power. So as we're looking at that, that's what we're going to see here. So power uses maximal intensities and maximal velocities to enhance your motor unit recruitment, your firing rate, your motor unit synchronization. You know, all these things that result in your nervous system becoming more sensitive and more powerful. We are going to utilize supersets by combining strength with power. We do strength first, because that's the high force exercise. We do power second. That's the high velocity exercise. This is sometimes referred to in the industry as a contrast set. So what contrast sets are, let's see if I can find a picture of this. Yeah, probably not a picture. A contrast set is where you do a very, very heavy lift followed immediately by something explosive that is very similar. So maybe it would be like, a bench press paired with like a clap push-up, right? That'd be a really good pair of a contrast set. You focus on the maximum force production first, then you focus on maximum velocity second. So let's go ahead and apply it. It's very similarly to how we were working on our endurance earlier, right? So if we go to the OPT model here, we're going to start with a resistance strength exercise, and then we are going to pair that with a resistance power exercise, right? And so the number of sets here, we're going to drop our sets down slightly because like we're doing supersets, the volume's going to go up. So that's going to drop our sets down from about 4 to 6 to about 3 to 5. So 3 to 5. Our reps are going to be 1 to 5 reps for our max strength movement, and they're going to be 1 to 10 reps for our power movement. Both are going to be explosive. Both are going to be XXX tempo. And because we are doing that superset technique, it's going to be 0 seconds of rest after your strength movement, and then 3 to 5 minutes of rest after your power movement. Sometimes. I'll explain in just a second. 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max on the strength movement, and then 30 to 45% of your 1 rep max for your power movement, or up to 10% body weight. So you got 2 options here. You can either do like, one of the classic versions of contrast setting was actually not doing 2 different exercises. It was literally just doing a bench press for your maximum intensity, stripping some weight off, and then doing that bench press super explosively at 30 to 45% of your 1 rep max. That also develops power, but NASM doesn't take that approach because they're trying to expose you to different types of exercise. So strength movements plus power movements. So again, we kind of go back to like that classic powerlifting routine. It was the bench press, right? It was the barbell squat. Let's say it's the military press and the deadlift, right? So like all of those are very strength style movements, but we also need to have a power movement paired up with that, with every one of these, right? So what that means is that we're going to do the bench press, and we're going to pair that with a medicine ball chest pass, or clap push-ups would be a great one. Barbell squat, we're going to pair that with a broad jump. Military press, we're going to pair that with a push press. Deadlift, we'll pair that up with a kettlebell swing, right? So all of that's a strength movement paired with a power movement. So maybe we do 4 sets of everything, right? Let's say we do 5 reps for our strength movement and 10 reps for our power. Both are going to be XXX tempos, very explosive. And then we're going to take 0 seconds of rest after the first one, and maybe 3 minutes of rest after the second one. And that's what that looks like, right? So now we've got sort of our classic like power routine here, right? That's really great, again, at developing like our rate of force production, right? So 3 to 5 reps, 1 to 5, 8 to 10. Oh, 8 to 10. Sorry, did I say 1 to 10 earlier? I did because I was thinking of dynamic stretches. Whoops. 8 to 10. 8 to 10 repetitions there. And then very, like I said, very explosive stuff on that. Now I will say the rest period here, we have that listed as 3 to 5 minutes. That's not 100% accurate. You'll actually see it listed in your textbook as 1 to 2 minutes between pairs, 3 to 5 minutes between circuits. So what that means is, like, if you're only doing like a little bit of paired training, like let's say you're doing just power exercises by themselves, you take 1 to 2 minutes of rest. Like if you don't do the max strength style, but if you get that max strength in there and you do that superset technique, we want a full 3 to 5 minutes of rest. So that is sort of everything in the realm of our strength training side of things. We're going to take a look at this in another form here in just a minute. But the other half of our program design is we have to look at, developing an effective cardio routine. So we also have like our stage training concept here, right? We have our clients who are going to do different like styles of conditioning. So when you're looking at this, there's not so much like sets and reps, right? If we were calling this conditioning, which is your cardio, right? You're either going to have like, stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3, right? You're going to have those individual stages depending on where you're at. They look very similar to the OPT model, right? Like they look very similar. You've got level 1, level 2, level 3. You got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. We already kind of talked about this when we went over the cardio day, but when you think about like what stage 1 is, this is to improve your general cardiorespiratory levels, right? This is your foundation. This is where your journey begins. So you're going to focus on trying to work your senior clients and really anybody up to about 30 to 60 minutes uninterrupted. If they can maintain a full 30 minutes at 65% of their heart rate, great. They're officially ready for zone 2, right? You can make it harder at that point. That's about a 12 to 13 on their ERPE scale, by the way. Or you can think of it as like the talk test. They should be able to hold a conversation while they're in zone 1 comfortably. So stage 1 is great because, again, it's where it starts, right? It's your foundation for everything. But then you're going to progress into stage 2 as your client's cardio improves. And so this is where we're going to start focusing on really kind of improving our lactate threshold. We're getting our body better at removing lactic acid from the system, right? And so we're going to do that by training up to an intensity where we're creating lots of lactic acid, right? So that's about 76 to 85% of your heart rate max, a 14 to 16 on the RPE scale. Talking should be difficult here. This is where it's like, okay, it's tough to talk. I can talk, but it's uncomfortable, right? And then we recover in zone 1. So we maybe do a little bit of interval training there. But not high intensity interval training. We're just really kind of introducing it, right? So you can see here's a really good example program here, right? You would literally warm up for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then you would maybe do 1 minute above that lactate threshold. So you are bringing the intensity up and creating lots of lactic acid. Then you're dropping down for 3 minutes to recover, back up for 1 minute, down for 3 minutes, and you're just kind of alternating back and forth there, right? And then we're going to cool down for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So that's sort of our strength style program, or our stage 2 style program, if you want to think of it that way. Then if we get a client who's in level 3, or you can think of this as stage 3, right? They're going to get a stage 3 cardio routine. This is not typically advised for senior clients. We want to make sure if we are doing something like this, they are in great shape. Again, based on the client, not on their age. But this is going to focus on like the idea of like peak capacity. This is anaerobic, high intensity fitness here, right? So that is where you are going to maybe get up to that lactate threshold for maybe, 2 minutes or so, but then you're actually going to go up into your peak for a full sprint for a minute, recover back under the lactate threshold, and sort of repeat, right? So up, up, up with the intensity. I personally, this one's okay. I actually really like you know, doing 1 minute in yellow, 1 minute in green, and 1 minute in red. I like to go kind of 1, 1, 1 and just repeat over and over and over again. That's my favorite version of a stage 3 routine personally. So if we're looking at how we would build that, let's say this is like, I'll go ahead and kind of delete this and just make some room here. Let's say this is conditioning for stage 1, right? For stage 1, you would literally just say, you know, let's say recumbent bike. You know, 1 set of like, well, see, it doesn't really work like that. Sets. This one. I don't know why I'm formatting this. So, all right. So it might look something like this. You put them on the recumbent bike. You do 1 set for 30 minutes. And we say 65 to 75% heart rate max. That's pretty simple, right? Like that's a pretty simple stage 1 routine. God dang it, I deleted the thing above it. Row above. Merge cells, fill it with blue. Oh, what's the NASM color? That one. So this is our stage 1 routine here, right? Pretty simple stuff, you know, nothing fancy there. But then let's say we want to make this slightly more complicated and we want to get into our interval training. We get into the idea of like stage 2. So what you might do is you might put them on the recumbent bike rather than just going for 30 minutes. You have them do, let's say, 3 minutes in that stage 1, right? And then you have them, you know, continue on that 1 set for 1 minute at 76 to 85% of their heart rate max, right? So that's, you can see really just this is zone 1 the entire time. But over here, they use zone 1 as a recovery. You know, what used to be their workout is now their recovery. And they use zone 2 as really pushing their intensity, right? And rather than doing like 1 set of each of those, we'd probably do, you know, if that's going to take 4 minutes and we want to do maybe 30 minutes of cardio, maybe we do like 7 rounds of each, right? And that's going to be about 28 minutes altogether. Then we could have a client who's in, you know, stage 3, right? They're going to get, you know, they're going to get another round here. So they're going to work their way from zone 1 into zone 2 into zone 3. And like I said, my favorite version of this is it looks something kind of like this. Wait a minute. That's funny. So, you know, that's going to take 3 minutes. So if we did 10 rounds of this, that'd be a 30-minute routine. By the way, 30 minutes of this is rough. I would honestly actually recommend closer to 20 minutes. And that's sort of what a stage 3 cardiorespiratory routine would look like. So you can see, you know, we are applying different levels of stress to our clients, both, you know, strength-wise, like neuromuscularly, but also cardiovascularly. So obviously you need to do a comprehensive fitness assessment if you're going to do any of this, but you can use the OPT model to be very systematic in how you approach things. You can make sure that like your client never has a chance to kind of get used to anything. You're continually cycling them through different types of stress on the body, which is going to result in different types of improvements. So any questions on that so far, guys? Bay, how are you feeling?
Okay. It's a lot of information, but good.
It is, right? Do you have any questions so I can help with that information?
No,
All
not
right.
that I can think of right now. No.
Sure. Okay. All right. So let's take a look. If we look at our chart here. So in your textbook, guys, you will find these charts, which have all these rules, a lot of rules that we laid out today. But luckily, these rules are actually all laid out on charts that look like this. These little tables here, right? So here's our strength endurance client, and this has everything. We've been talking about like our exercise selection. We talked about how, stabilization gets corrective flexibility in stage 1 cardio, or, core stabilization, balance stabilization, reactive stabilization, right? We moved through all of these different, levels of training in terms of exercise selection. So you can actually see they've got that listed here. If you've got a client who's in strength endurance, that's phase 2. For flexibility, you are going to do 5 to 10 reps, 1 to 2 sets, active isolated stretches, right? So that's the rules that we already kind of laid out for you guys. You can see they're all kind of on this one big chart here. For their core, core strength. For their balance strength. Plyometric strength, because they're in the strength level, right? So 8 to 12, and here's your rep ranges for all that. So we've got this all laid out kind of intensely in all these different pages. You're going to find those, I think it's like 379 or something like that. Or I think that's what it is. I'm not actually 100% sure. So there's a lot of different charts. There's 5 of them. There's one chart for every phase of training. But one thing that we've done here at school is we created this. Now, like I said, guys, make your own physical big charts. Go get a piece of line paper, turn it sideways, write this out for yourself. A lot of people actually end up, it kind of goes onto 2 pages, and then a lot of people like tape it together. Unless you got super small handwriting, in which case, go for it. But this is every single chart all on one page. Sort of one page. I mean, you can see it's 2 pages, but it's all in one big form. So what this looks like is you've got your stabilization clients, your strength clients, and your power clients. And you'll notice, for the most part, like, the warm-up, the movement prep section, the SAQ section, all of this is the same in terms of the level, right? Like if I've got a client in max strength or hypertrophy or strength endurance, that doesn't mean anything until I get to the resistance section, right? So the sets and the reps and everything, and like the exercise selection for movement prep and for warming up and SAQ, all that stuff is the same here. But then on the resistance section, this is where, we see some differences, right? We're going to see strength endurance reps versus hypertrophy reps versus maximum strength reps. So these are all the rules that we kind of laid out today. This is sort of a different approach to it. Normally in class, we like to kind of actually go over each and every individual cell of the chart. Today, we kind of did it in a slightly different version where we did it in the notes. Charlie, hopefully this was a slightly unique take on it. We do every one of these mods, slightly different from each other so that we can kind of expose you guys in different ways. Yeah, so just working our way across the chart here really, really quick. So again, flexibility training for stabilization clients. They're going to get SMR and static stretches because that is corrective flexibility. That's going to be 1 to 3 sets, 30 seconds holds. For cardio, they're going to get stage 1 cardio. Stage 1, it only consists of zone 1. Pretty simple, right? Stage 2 clients, moving on from there, they got core. You've got core stabilization, balance stabilization, plyometric stabilization, right? SAQ, really you're only going to focus on speed movements. Stands for speed, agility, and quickness. We're pretty much going to spend all our time on speed. And then for resistance training, you can see these are all the numbers we laid out earlier. 1 to 3 sets, 12 to 20 reps, 4-2-1 tempo, 50 to 70 of the 1 rep max, and 0 to 90 seconds of rest. Here in the strength level, all clients in the strength level are going to get active flexibility, which is SMR and active stretches. We're going to do those for 1 to 2 sets, 5 to 10 reps. You're going to hold each rep for about 1 to 2 seconds, depending on how comfortable it is or how much they kind of need. Your cardio, you're either going to do a stage 2 routine, which means you're going to alternate between zones 1 and 2. You're going to do zone 2 for work. You're going to do zone 1 for recovery. Then they're getting core strength, balance strength, reactive strength. Depending on what phase they're in, they're getting all, doesn't matter. They're all getting strength movements. And it's all going to be 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps. You'll notice that we don't do core or balance for maximum strength reps or anything like that. We're just going to keep that the same. Then we look at SAQ. Right now, we're gonna still apply some speed drills, but now because we're in level 2, we're gonna start also applying some changes in direction. We're gonna add a little bit of agility in there. And then clients, and then it gets interesting because the resistance section depends on which phase you're in. If they're in strength endurance, they're kind of easing their way out of stabilization. They're gonna pair strength movements with stabilization movements, right? They're going to do that for about 2 to 4 sets, 8 to 12 repetitions for each movement. So that's really 16 to 24 if you think about it. A 2-0-2 tempo for your strength movement, or a 4-2-1 tempo for your stabilization. 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max, and no rest after the stabilization movement. 60 seconds of rest after the strength movement. Then if your client moves forward a month, you would keep your movement prep and your flexibility and your cardio the same, but then you would apply all the hypertrophy stuff, right? 3 to 5 sets, 6 to 12 reps, 2-0-2 tempo, 75 to 85% of your 1 rep max, and about 60 seconds of rest. So relatively short rest, but not super short. Relatively high intensity, but not super high. It's in the middle of everything. Max strength though, totally on the extreme end of things, right? Very, very heavy. You're going to go resistance strength exercises, 4 to 6 sets, the highest number we're going to see, 1 to 5 reps, XXX tempo, 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max. So we're lifting very, very, very heavy here, and we're taking lots and lots and lots of rest, 3 to 5 minutes. Then we finally get to change things up again, and we're going to do functional flexibility for clients who are in power. That's going to be SMR and dynamic stretches, 3 to 10 exercises in terms of like how many you choose. You can do about 1 to 2 sets of about 10 to 15 reps there. Stage 3 cardio, you're going to do zone 3 for your work, and you're going to use zones 2 and 1 for recovery. So again, we're basically building on the foundation that we did, from our last, let's say, month, right? Then core power, balance power, reactive power. Then in the SAQ section, you're going to include quickness now. So you do speed and agility and quickness. And then we are going to apply a strength movement plus a power movement. So we are doing that superset technique. 3 to 5 sets of 1 to 5 reps for your strength movement, and then you pair that with 8 to 10 reps of your power movement. Both are going to be very, very explosive. You do 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max for your strength movement because it is a strength movement. And then up to 10% of your body weight, or maybe between 30 and 45% of your 1 rep max for your power movement. We took about 1 to 2 minutes between pairs. We take about 3 to 5 minutes between circuits. So obviously memorizing all that in the span that I just talked about it is not going to be possible. But hopefully by now you guys have been exposed to this a bunch of times. I mean, Bae, this is your first time, but the more you get exposed to it, the better and better and better it gets. Like I said, the best thing you guys can do is, take that big chart and literally physically copy it down. It is one of the absolute best things that you can do. And yeah, that is actually about it today, guys. Questions, comments, concerns? Charlie, how you feeling? It's your last big chart day.
Pretty good, bro. You know, a lot of this stuff comes to our mind, you know, because like you said, it is repetitive. So
Yeah. Do you get it all memorized by now?
it's a good thing. I don't know about fully, but you know, it's good that you guys go over it, you know, like that. It's helpful.
I'll take it. I'll take it. It's not like you're not going to be going. You will go over this stuff with Mo as well, but he doesn't go through the big chart the way I do. He doesn't spend quite as much time on it, which is, you know, helpful.
But when do I start with him?
I think Wednesday. Yeah, right, because today is day 7,
Wednesday.
8, 9, 10. Yeah, Wednesday. We gotta make our sad adieu.
I know, right?
All right, guys. Well, Bay, Kenny, you guys have any questions for me? Nothing. All right,
No.
guys.
All right,
That's
thank
about
you. Have a good day. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll see you guys tomorrow.